Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Mum. I'm Natasha and today I have Dr. Joe Mueller with me. Do you want to introduce yourself because you're going to do a better job than I am? Okay.
So I'm Joe Mueller. My surname's
Mueller,
always
sorry.
Miller, a bit like the yogurts.
I should have asked you that. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Mueller Corner. Yeah, obviously.
it's a tricky one. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I specialise in working with parents.
Yes.
My background is in working with children and families. I worked in the NHS in CAMS for many years, across neurodevelopmental services and regular CAMS and also paediatric health services. I've also worked in academic research around children's mental health and parenting children with neurodivergent diagnoses. And now I mainly work in private practice, working directly with parents, supporting them with their parenting, but also their mental health.
Oh, okay. So you support parents with parenting and their mental health.
I think those two things tend to go hand in hand.
Definitely.
I think it's good to be able to straddle both.
I think the thing is, the reason like I loved you, I found you on Instagram, and the reason I loved it is because like I am a therapist because I was a family worker who was supporting children and mainly supporting their parents with their mental health and parenting. And I didn't feel like I had the tools or enough training to be able to do that. My
Mm.
work would argue otherwise. So I retrained. And so seeing
Mm.
everything that you do, it's just like that's just my belief. Like if we're healthy, we're better parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you've had a similar path to kind of realizing
Mm.
that this is all circular. We need, parents' mental health needs to be supported in order for them to be able to be the parent they want to be for their child, but they also need to have some idea of, what kind of parenting they want to do for their child. So if they feel like they don't know what to do, then they're going to feel more stressed and their mental health is going to suffer. But if their mental health is suffering, they're not going to be able to use the kind of skills and approaches that they want to be able to use. So for me, it's non-negotiable. You do need to be able to do both.
Yeah. And it's just wild that we think we should just know how to do it all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel so grateful for all the training that I have done just because you're literally, it's like you're stabbing in the dark. Like, I hope this works. I'll go onto Instagram and I'll ask, then I'll go onto Google and I'll ask. And I don't know if I'm doing it right. And then obviously, you spend a lot of the time feeling like you're failing because I even now like I have been going through loads of stuff with my daughter at the moment and her behavior
Mm.
just she's just really emotional at the moment, and if I what didn't talk about it I wouldn't know that, oh okay, like she's a certain age where girls have hormone surges and it could be that, but it also could be a lot of other things. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really tricky. I think if you're a parent out there and you're on Instagram, you're being fed all kinds of messages that can be really very confusing, not very nuanced, and it really can just make you feel even worse than before you went on there.
yeah, because I think that one of the things there was this really funny post I've just seen a minute ago. Some guy had done a post where he was like, oh, I'm getting up and I'm doing all these things. And he like listed all these, I don't know if you've seen it. He listed like, I'm like ice bathing and I'm working out and I'm doing my 11, like I'm not having coffee before 11. And I'm like, there was like a list of all these things we could do for our health. And then we got to hack our kids' health. But then where are we going to focus? Like, are we going to focus on their physical health or their mental health or their education or their, like, there's so many
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
that, like, if you can't be kind to yourself, you're going to feel like you're failing every single day.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very overwhelming. It's bad enough being a parent in the first place. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming, but with all these extra messages, it's extra overwhelming. And well, you've sort of hit the nail on the head. Self-compassion is sort of my bag. Talking about, mum guilt and shame, and thinking about how we talk to ourselves, not just mums, of course. I just said mums because we're both mums.
Because we're mums, yeah.
But dads as well. I work with a lot of men. I work with a lot of dads who feel, exactly the same. The pressure gets to everyone.
Yeah, and because it is pressure. I personally, I know obviously there are dads who feel the pressure, but I don't think that dads are on social media as a rule in the same way as mums are. That, like, I don't know, my partner is not reading all the stuff that I'm reading. Obviously there are some, and I have clients who are men, but like, as mums, we take on the load, I think, so much more. And there will be so many things that I'll say to my husband, he'll be like, oh yeah, like, it just, like, he's not worrying about like what they're eating in the same way that I am. Or like, I just think as mums, we want to micromanage them more in a way that I just wish I could let go of sometime. And I know that I'm definitely not the worst, and I'm not the best either.
Yeah, I definitely think, if I look at the gender split on my Instagram followers, it is mostly women. I think perhaps more dads are starting to kind of look up parenting tips now than perhaps a few years ago. But I think you're right. As a general rule, mums tend to be the ones looking for answers, looking for information, maybe a bit more than dads.
Yeah. And so if a client comes to you and they are struggling with mum guilt, what would be your top tips?
It's a big question, Natasha.
A big question.
Big question. So, for me, it is complicated, and people want there to be, I think, a really simple answer. And if you go onto Instagram, there will be accounts where they're just like, just kick the mum guilt, just and I just think it's not that simple, because it is complicated. Our brains are actually wired up to do certain things. Like, we're wired up to compare ourselves to other people, and to kind of be hyper vigilant to more negative information.
Yeah.
Our brains are just wired up that way. So we're already kind of
bias is just ridiculous.
right. Exactly.
I was just
So
talking to my friend a minute ago, and she said like she'd been at therapy, and her therapist had said, if you can just, like, the goal is to think of positively 51% of the time. If you're doing that, that's unbelievable.
yeah, I mean, so we're starting off from a place of having the brain that we have, which isn't our fault. We're growing up in societies where there are narratives about what being a parent means, what being a mother means, what being a father means. We're growing up in a society where we don't have that village that we used to have. We don't have the support, but we also don't get to see what kind of normal day-to-day life is like for other parents as well. So we sort of don't have all the information about what's typical.
And then we feel bad, and then we don't share. And when we don't share, then no one shares with us.
Exactly. And there's that famous phrase that shame dies in safe spaces. And so when people can tell their stories, that's when shame melts away. But the opposite is also true, obviously, like just as you were just saying. Then we've also got the other influences of the fact that we've grown up in a society that promotes achievement and doing things perfectly and doing things really well. And then a lot of us take that into parenthood and sort of think, well, we're going to win at parenting, we're going to achieve parenting. And then we find it doesn't work that way. And if we can realize that, great. But a lot of people sort of don't realize that, and kind of carry on and just feel like they're failing all the time.
One of my favorite things to talk to my clients about who are like very high achieving is the difference between like getting things done with a carrot and getting things done with a stick. And if you get things done with a stick, it works, and it's probably worked really well. Like, that's probably why you're really successful. But there's these consequences all the time. of the stick, like you don't sleep, like you don't ever feel good enough. The carrot might not work as quick, but you get to feel calmer and happier and proud of yourself.
I think it's so important the way that we talk to ourselves, because that feeds into the mum guilt in a vicious circle. You know, like exactly like you're just saying, if we criticize ourselves, our brain actually receives that as a threat, and it's more likely to put us in that fight flight mode. And then when we're in that sort of dysregulated state, we're more likely to be reactive to the children. You know, we're more likely to do things that we then do feel guilty about. And then the more we feel guilty, the more we criticize ourselves. The more we criticize ourselves, the more our brain is in that dysregulated state, the more we make, you know, well, not mistakes.
Bad choices. Just choices we're not proud of.
Right, exactly. So there's like really good biological reasons why kind of being able to be a bit gentler and more accepting of ourselves is really important. So I think your original
basically there's no quick fix.
Yeah, there's no quick fix, and this is where I start with people I work with. You know, I kind of go through a lot of this and really help people understand what's behind all of this, because then you can come from a place of knowledge, a place of understanding, and that for me starts to breed a little bit of self-compassion, even just from the understanding.
So just really important to have that like psychoeducation.
I think so. I really think it's a crucial foundation.
I love. So actually, I was talking to my daughter yesterday. So, like, I'm sure you've seen Inside Out too.
Of course, I've seen Inside Out too.
Inside Out, like, it's
I'm a psychologist, aren't I?
It's hard. It's like our dream movie. and I'm like, to every single one of my clients, you have to watch it, like, because there's nothing that explains it better. But yesterday I was having a conversation with my daughter. She'd had a meltdown about her bike or something. And she was like, I just can't control the anger. Can't control the anger. And she was talking about anger, like, Inside Out, where the anger and the sadness, like, it wins. And I was like, that's psychoeducation. Like, we're all doing it for our kids. Like, we want them to learn. We've got all the books.
Yep.
But we need to do it for us as well.
Yep. Exactly. We're completely on the same page with that. I think, we're all desperately trying to be kind of empathetic and compassionate and understanding to our children and help them label their emotions and, help with all of that. But how often are we actually doing the same thing for ourselves?
And modelling is so much more important.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
I just did a post a minute ago and it was like, you're going to shout. Like, every parent's going to shout. You've got to do the repair. That's the important bit. But I was like, because if we don't shout, then we're literally saying to them, you're not allowed to be angry and you're not allowed to be sad. But we're telling them anger and sadness is okay, but it's not okay for us.
Yeah. I think it's such an important message for parents to know that it is healthy for our children to see a range of emotions, from us, know that it's okay for them to, and like you say, it's the repair that is the crucial part, because, when you see adults in therapy, often, they'll say, but I don't want to be like, my mum or my dad and shout too much. And yeah, of course that's true. But then when you say, but did they did they repair with you? Did they ever apologize? Did they ever, come to you and reconnect? And, most of the time they'll say no.
I don't even think it was something my mum would know to do.
I think it is generational for sure. The idea of apologizing to your children and reconnecting like that, I don't think it was in the repertoire for most of our parents and our grandparents' generations. But we know that that's important, and we know that even now, if a parent, if a mum goes to their parents or a dad and says, has that conversation, and their parent says, now, you know what, I'm really sorry, that I was too harsh on you, or that I shouted at you too much, or whatever it was that hurt them. if they get that connection, even, you know, decades later,
Yeah.
it makes an enormous difference.
Yeah.
An enormous difference. So just think, you know, if you're a parent who's able to repair with your child, even some of the time, maybe not all the time, even some of the time now, that is amazing, and that is going to be absolutely brilliant for their development, because then they're going to learn how to do that too.
I know, like learning to say sorry. I never learned how to say sorry. Like it's like having to learn as a grown-up.
Yeah, and many of us are. I think that's what is so hard about. But not only are we having all the difficulties of parenting now, but we're also having to learn a load of stuff that we didn't already know.
No, we've got to learn to communicate. We've got to learn, like parents, we don't necessarily know how to communicate. And we've got to have children and we've got to communicate with our partners. And we've never really had to communicate them before. Like you could be a bit passive aggressive and you could brush things under the carpet. And it's so much easier when you haven't got children and you haven't got to navigate everything together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something else, yeah, I'd work on quite a lot. So I have a club called the Guilty Parent Club, and there's sort of a whole module on helping parents develop assertive and emotionally connected communication skills, mainly, you know, with their partner or with extended family, because it is so important.
Oh, I love that, the Guilty Parent Club. So what's in the Guilty Parent Club?
Well, in the Guilty Parent Club, it's basically a series of audio podcasts, because I know that parents don't have time to watch.
Love that, because I
videos.
bloody hate when anything is on a video.
Yeah, parents don't have time to watch videos. They don't have time to do loads of reading. There are workbooks that go along with the podcasts with sort of exercises and summaries in it, but essentially it's audio based. And we have live meetings every 2 weeks at the moment this year. And it's based on my 6P key model, which basically breaks down different strategies into 6 groups, all beginning with P.
Yeah.
And like we were just saying, you know, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. So they all apply to strategies we can use with our kids to help them stay more regulated, help us stay more on side with them, you know, promote healthy development, but also kind of get stuff done. But then those 6Ps also then map onto us as parents. You know, how can we do for ourselves what we're doing for our kids? And they help us to be kind of more emotionally regulated, look after ourselves better, be more self-compassionate to ourselves, kind of understand our background and our own childhoods a bit, and yeah, develop those communication skills as well.
And that's the thing, everything that we're doing for our kids, if we do it for ourselves, then we're more emotionally regulated.
Exactly. Yeah.
So straightforward.
Yeah. So I really felt like there needed to be both things in this club. You know, it can't just be strategies to use with your kids, and it can't just be strategies to use for yourself. You know, we need both of those things.
Yeah, we do. I always think it's really weird how we all want our kids to like get out and exercise, but then we think it's a luxury.
Yeah, exactly, totally. And I think it comes from like being able to tune into what we need a bit and give ourselves permission to tune into what we need.
Yes. And that is one of the things I'm really, really trying to make time for at the moment. That's like my priority probably for this year is I do all the things. So I'll listen to the podcasts and like listening to audiobooks, and I'll go for my like quiet walk, or now I'll go for like a walk or do exercise, but there's never any time to just like listen to my mind. And like making time to just, I know people don't like meditation. Lots of people don't like it, and I actually love meditation, but do I make time for it? No. But making time to like listen to my thoughts and to just be more in tune with what I actually want is the most important thing.
It's so hard for so many people. You know, again, I think we've been brought up in a society where, you know, a lot of us are kind of cut off from our bodies. Like there's a lot of, you know, thinking that goes on, but we're not really that in tune with how our bodies feel, what emotions we're feeling and what those emotions are telling us, like what those messages are. We've sort of been taught to sort of suppress things, ignore things. We haven't learned, how to integrate our body and our emotions and our thoughts all together. And for a lot of people, it can be quite frightening. I mean, if you've had a trauma background, obviously it's going to, that's likely to be extremely difficult and might be something you need to work through, in one-to-one therapy. But even if you haven't, I think it's just something that just wasn't focused on when we were younger. And it's something, it's not necessarily about meditation. I mean, I think if you like meditation, that's fantastic. But if I think a lot of parents are really sort of scared or put off by the idea of it because we just don't have time. Yeah, for me, it's awareness, I think, and that's really, when you hear the word mindfulness, it's not mindfulness. Basically, just means awareness, and so, but it does take a bit of practice, but you can become aware of what's going on for you in like not very long. If you have a bit of practice at it, you can just do a really super quick check-in.
Yeah. So what I just do at the moment is like, what do I need to make today a good day? So I didn't have time this morning. So as I was walking back from school, rather than put my AirPods in, I was like, what do I need today? And then I got to the traffic lights. And what did I do? I went to get my phone out. And I was like, no, like put your phone away. If this is a 7-minute walk, you can do it. But it is so unnatural because we're so used to filling every second of time with like, oh, I need to quickly pay for the swimming, or I need to book parents' evening. They're all coming to me now.
Yeah. I'm now. Oh my gosh, what do I need to book?
And you get like a pocket of time, and you're like, oh, I'll do something else. And I actually just sat. I don't normally eat till about 11 o'clock, but I was like, okay, what I need today is I've got a really busy morning, and I've been to the gym, and I haven't been well. I need to eat some food. That was it. Like, it was just like a really basic thing. I need to make sure I've eaten some food.
Exactly. I think, and exactly. Just taking that time to just check in with what you need, and then not only to notice it, but then to give yourself permission to try to meet that need as well. And it can be something just even as small as that, of being like, you know what, I wouldn't normally eat at this time, but my body is telling me today that is what I need to do. And I think as women as well, sort of hormonally, I think not every day is the same. Being able to kind of tune into rhythms as well as our emotions is really important. And it might be that, obviously as parents, we can't just be like, oh, you know what I need a week at the spa. Obviously we're not going to be able to do that. But sometimes it is just a small thing, like you say, of just being like, you know what, I actually just need 5 minutes of quiet walking just right now. Or it could be anything.
5 minutes. I just need to tell the kids to give me 5 minutes. Like,
yeah, exactly.
that when they're tiny, I know that it's much harder to do that.
It is.
But my kids are 4 and 7, and it does change. And I think you can forget that it doesn't change. Like at every stage, there are little things. Like I can say to my kids, no, I need 5 minutes, or mummy's feeling a bit stressed because no one's listening and we're going to be late for school, or like you can say those things. Like that bit at the middle, the beginning, feels long, but it's really short.
Yep. Shout out to any parents in the trenches with like under 5s, because it does. It absolutely does change.
But I have got a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
I've still got a 4-year-old, but he can watch telly for 5 minutes. He can watch telly for more than 5 minutes, but he can watch telly for 5 minutes, and I can have 5 minutes if I need it. Like he can. I remember when they were. I do though. I would say when they were little, I think a lot of me not having any time for myself was guilt.
Right.
And knowing the difference between how much was guilt and how much was because it was hard. Like, yes, it was hard, but there were things like I could have put my daughter into. I only had my daughter in nursery for 2 days a week, after my son was born, and I could have put her in nursery more, or I
Yeah.
could have asked my mum for more help, and I didn't because I felt guilty that
Mm.
she would feel rejected.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really, really important point to take kind of stock when you really feel like there's no way of meeting any of your needs as a parent, is to take stock of like, is this 100% a practical problem? Or am I being my own worst enemy here a little bit? And what could be shifted, even just slightly. I think we've all been there. I had a friend who was slightly ahead of me with their children's ages when mine were really tiny, and I was kind of, going a bit crazy, like many people find. And she was just like, if you possibly can, get some more help from somewhere. And no one's coming around with a medal. No one is going to come around with a medal and say, well done to you. You sort of ran yourself completely ragged there. And I think it's good advice. Obviously, there's lots of practical barriers, not support around, financial barriers, time barriers, but
One of the things that I found really interesting recently, I've got a client who's a nanny, and she was working in a family, but now she's working ad hoc. And she was like, yeah, look, get a bubble app. You can get this, like, you can get nannies. They can come, like, you can get to know them. I was like, I wish I could have you, but you can get to know them. Like, you can have them for a couple of hours. Like, she tells me things she'll do. Like, she's like, oh, today, like, I'm just doing a bit of meal prep and I'm going food shopping and I'm going to make the dinner. I'm like, what? People pay for that? Like, yeah, some people do.
yeah. And I think if you're lucky enough to kind of have a bit of financial flexibility, it really is worth it, just for that really acute period when you've got really tiny kids. If you can afford a bit of extra support. And I think that the problem is, I think what feeds a lot of parents' guilt is that there's all these messages out there on social media that about really misleading messages about attachment with our kids.
Yeah, we spoke about this before.
We did. And people get sort of really just the wrong
Yeah,
idea.
it's not real.
Just not real ideas
Real.
about what matters,
Yeah.
for children, what matters in terms of our attachment with our kids, and what matters in terms of their development. And an extra day in nursery a week, or an afternoon of help from a babysitter, or whatever it is not what matters in terms of our relationship with our children and their development. It just isn't.
Because it's quality over quantity. Like,
Yeah.
the quality of your relationship is what is important. And the other thing is that no one is showing you how much help they have on social media.
Yeah.
So people don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I have a cleaner. I don't put that I have a cleaner on my social media.
Yeah.
Like, there are people who, like, the influencers you're following all have nannies.
Yeah, 100%. And they're making things look easy when they're not easy at all.
No, they're calling themselves stay-home mums and they're content creators. That's a job.
Yeah. And I think, what we know matters is parents' mental health. That's what matters. Because if you're not okay, you can't be there for your child. You can't connect with them in the way that you want to. You're the linchpin.
And as therapists, like, it's like we have this, like, bird's eye view, which is really lucky. But you don't get, no client has ever come to me and said, my mum let me watch TV for an hour, or my mum put me in nursery for an extra day. Like,
Yeah.
these aren't the things that people are coming to therapy for.
No way. People don't come being like, oh, my mum used to sometimes shout at me to get my shoes on. Yeah.
Or my mum was rushing me for school because I wasn't getting dressed.
Yeah. These are not the things that people end up in therapy for. But I think, it's really understandable that parents worry about all this, because there is just so much pressure, and this idea that you can create this sort of perfect parenting
There's a
life.
lot. I've seen a lot recently about not putting your children in childcare,
Really,
because they're being raised by other people and they're not being raised by you.
it's just evolutionarily doesn't make sense, because evolutionarily we would have all been raised in large communities.
Yeah, we would. And that's what's lovely. I mean, that was one of the things that I was at. I think my daughter's nearly 7 now. So social media wasn't such a big thing when I became a parent the first time. And I remember, because my dad's from Zimbabwe, and his parents died before I was born. Didn't know them. My granny lived like an hour away. She wasn't that involved. My mum didn't have a good relationship with her mum. Like, she'd have us for like, she actually did have us for like a week at a time, but she wasn't like just around having cups of tea and like ad hoc there. And I just remember thinking, my daughter's so lucky that she gets to have sleepovers at her granny's whenever she wants, and she gets to go to her nan's all the time. Like, I used to be jealous of my friends who could do that. And like that she had grandparents who were obsessed with her. But we don't see it like that. We're like, oh, we should raise our kids, we feel guilty. No, how they have all these people that love them. That can't be a bad thing.
It isn't. And I think there's a lot, there's a lot of, things go in trends a bit, don't they, on social media. And of course there's the kind of trad wife trend at the moment, which is, it being a big influence on lots of aspects of people's opinions on how to raise kids. Obviously I'm just of the opinion that, you just got to do whatever works for you. Whatever works for you. But a lot of people don't have any choice. If the cost of living now is extremely high, and most people can't manage on one income in their
I know, exactly.
household.
It's not a choice for both of you to go to work.
It's not a choice. And we know that,
to be fair, it is my choice. Like, even if I could afford to stay at home, I wouldn't be. Just to make that clear.
yeah. And the thing is that's what's right for one person isn't right for another. But making parents feel guilty about literally every single thing that they do and they choose and they feel and they think is not going to help anybody, least of all children.
No, like constantly, like raising women who never feel good enough. It's not good for your kids.
We're just training parents to not trust their instincts, to just doubt themselves constantly. And it's just terrible. It's terrible for parents' mental health. It's no good for, kids to grow up in a family where, their parents are just constantly doubting themselves and feeling ashamed and stressed. It just doesn't make any sense.
I always think that that one of the reasons that we need to like listen to our intuition and like get back to our values is when you're worrying about something you have sin. Does it align with your values as a parent? Like, my values are a parent. Values as a parent. I want my children to be happy. I want them to be confident, and I want them to be resilient. And like, if I'm really worrying about something, it's just to think about those three things and to think, does it really affect that?
I think it's really important to have that kind of overall view of, you and your family. And that's another thing I work in the club, but also individually with parents on, is kind of mapping out their values as a person, their values as a parent, and then also thinking about what their child needs and what their family needs, and sort of seeing where the intersection of these things are, because we need to be able to follow our values as people, individual people, so that we can feel fulfilled and therefore be able to give more to our family. What do we care about as a parent? What does our partner care about? How does that map on in our family? How does that guide how we parent as
It's
co-parents.
something we should be talking about before we have kids, but most of us don't.
Yeah, I think it would be good a good
Be
idea.
useful while we were just like worrying about birth. If we
Yeah,
had a few less conversations about birth and a few
right,
more
right.
conversations about what the realities of our life's going to be.
Exactly. But then also to think about what our child needs, because, all children are different. And you might have had an idea in your head about, like, yeah, this is what family life's going to be like. This is the kind of parent I'm going to be like. And then you become a parent and you're like, number one, this isn't what I imagined. I'm a different kind of parent than I thought. I thought I was going to be incredibly patient and, loving and kind. And actually, I'm a bit irritable and, I get touched out and I, need a bit more time to myself than I thought I did. But then you might also just have a different child than you imagined. Your child might need something different than you thought they would. And being able to kind of be flexible, actually look at what we need, what our child needs, and not stick too rigidly to, that fantasy basically of what we thought it was going to be like, I think is really
Which
important.
can be a massive challenge, because if you are someone who likes structure and routine and for things to like go in order,
Mhm.
then like it's going to be, your world is going to blow up a bit. And
It's difficult, I think, for a lot of people to sort of to not go into self-blame mode when things aren't how they imagined that it was going to be, and to come around to be like, okay, this is just different to how I imagined. My child is just different to how I thought they were going to be. I'm just different to how I thought I was going to be as a parent. That's okay. I need to, let's adjust to the reality. Let's look at what we've got here and how can we make this work? How can we go forward with kind of new values rather than clinging on to, because before we had kids, I'm sure all of us were like, oh, it's gonna,
they're going to eat
I'm
everything.
gonna eat everything. I'm definitely never gonna make them a separate dinner.
No,
And,
I'm definitely not.
I'm gonna be really, really, when they're ill, I'm gonna be just, there with a cold flannel the whole, all the night long. And, I'm
Yeah,
gonna just, we just have these, they're fantasies.
they're
I'm gonna
fantasies.
have a little girl who loves, horse riding. I'm gonna have a little boy who's, brilliant at football or something. And you even if you don't consciously think you have these hopes and expectations, you do. It's
You do.
natural. It's
I
natural to
think
have them.
I think like I'm now at that stage where I was like, my dad was really focused on education. I'm like, I'm going to be chill about education. I'm not going to worry about it. And then now my daughter's in school. Am I worrying about it? Of course I am.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to not think about those things, like, because they're
Mm,
important. And that's why my dad, who didn't manage his emotions at all, he was just like, education is important. She needs it for her future. I'm going to just be like a dictator telling her to study.
mm.
Um, uh, yeah, they're all, and that's the other thing. Your kids change every single day. So
That is, yeah, really important to remember.
yeah,
How they are
yeah.
today is not how things are going to be in 6 months or a year.
And one day you're going to feel like you've got, you know what you're doing, and then they're going to change.
Yeah, exactly. But also, if you're in like a sticky period now, then things will change, shift and change.
Everything will pass.
Yeah.
Everything, even sleep deprivation, even fussy eating, everything does pass.
Yeah, although I would say that sometimes if for parents of neurodivergent kids, sometimes those things can persist a bit longer.
So
Um,
I actually was really interested in that. So we haven't talked about neurodivergent children at all,
mhm.
but um, so fussy eating and neurodivergent children. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I suppose when I'm thinking specifically about autistic children, often have sensory sensitivities,
Yes.
and that can impact on their diet, and
Yeah.
it can also be part of the kind of rigidity, the difficulty with change that comes along with autism
Okay.
often as well. So that together with the sensory sensitivities that are also part of the diagnostic criteria can often lead to just I guess picky eating would be the sort of common way of talking about it.
Yes.
Just not, being very scared to try new foods, or just won't try new foods, and just maybe just having quite a narrow repertoire of what they might eat. There's, sometimes can get to the point where it would be categorized as something called ARFID,
Okay.
which stands for, oh my gosh, I can literally never remember what ARFID stands for. It's like avoidant. It's basically kind of avoidant and restrictive patterns around
Yes.
food. And that can be diagnosed when things get, particularly difficult. But because it's part of an autistic profile
So
and a characteristic.
if someone has this issue, I'm
Mm.
thinking of someone in particular at the moment. If someone has this issue and they don't have a diagnosis, or this is sounding really familiar, what
Yeah.
would you suggest?
I mean, I think I'm just always of the opinion of, whatever it is, go and seek some advice from somebody who knows what they're talking about, whether you think it's to do with autism or not, whether it's just the food, whatever
because
it
it
is.
could just be sensory processing as well.
Yeah, anything you're worrying about as a parent, if you have access to the resources to talk to somebody who has some expertise in something, I just think it's always worth, getting advice, because it can set your mind at rest, save you going round and round in your head at home, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, thinking it's your fault in some way, not knowing what to do, getting stressed. Seek some advice,
Yeah.
if you
And I
can.
do. I think if you can, that with anything, it's like if your baby's not sleeping and you're losing your mind, speak to someone about sleep. If you're, my daughter was really, really difficult to wean, and to be fair, I asked the health visitor, and she wasn't helpful at all. She was
Mm.
just, my daughter was really big. Both my kids were huge, and she said, "Well, she is eating something." Yeah, well, obviously milk. Like
Yeah.
she's only eating milk, and so like I wouldn't necessarily go to the health visitor, but there are so many people you can go to, and I didn't have anything to worry about. She's just fussy. She's fussy now. Like she's
Mm.
so much better
Yeah.
than
I think the
she.
trouble is that it can really put people off, can't it? If you get kind of invalidated by somebody at some point, you reach out for help and someone can be quite, doesn't give you good advice or is a bit invalidating, that can really put people off looking for
And
support and make them feel quite ashamed. And that has happened to many, many parents of neurodivergent children who at various points might have thought, is there something else going on here, and then have had, perhaps a professional, perhaps someone in education, perhaps a family member say, no, you're just imagining it, you're making a fuss about nothing, it's just your parenting, it's just, you need to be stricter with them, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then, that shuts them down, and then, it does make them think, well, this must be my fault, like I must be a bad parent. And I see that pattern over and over again.
yeah, so do
And it's
I, over and over
incredibly
again. Because
frustrating. Yeah.
the other thing is you can have a referral and then it just gets rejected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is like, we've been taught to listen to doctors. Like if
Mhm.
a referral gets rejected, we've been taught to just accept that. And if you're not confident, because like you say, you've got one child, why would you be confident?
Exactly.
It can be really, really difficult.
It's difficult out there at the moment. There's huge waiting lists in the NHS. Not everyone has the means to go privately. There's it's, even if you go privately, then you've got sometimes people saying, "Oh, we won't accept
Well, I was
that
going to
private
say
assessment,"
that
which
when
is
I was a family worker, we were not allowed to accept the private assessment, even though we were
outrageous.
having to tell families they were going to have to wait for years for an assessment with CAMS.
My view is that there's going to start being legal action about this, because if you
Okay.
look at the NICE guidelines set out what a gold standard assessment is. And it does not say anything about who the employer of that clinician must be. Okay, it does not have to be the NHS.
Yeah.
As long as the clinician is appropriately qualified, or clinicians, and they follow the nice guidelines in terms of the process, and the report matches those guidelines, there's absolutely no basis for needing it to be within the NHS. And frankly, because the NHS, great, the NHS is there for a really good reason, but these waiting lists are years and years long.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, because
For
it's
a
like,
child,
if
yeah,
they want us to go private on anything we
yeah,
can,
yeah.
like,
It's
but not
no,
an ADHD or an
no,
ASC assessment.
yeah, and to me, it's discrimination. Because if you have a child who desperately needs support and help, and they need a diagnosis in order to get that support and help, and then you're saying, well, you can't, even though you could get that diagnosis, you can't, because you've now got to wait another 5 years to get it from a
And it is
particular.
literally 5 years in
It
like
literally,
teenagers, isn't it?
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then to me, that starts bordering on. I think there might be some legal action coming soon for this type of thing, because there are laws around disability discrimination that I think might start to be looked at.
Yeah, I would say it's a difficult one, because like I can imagine, like as a family worker, I was told that. So the teachers are probably told the same thing, like, oh, they're not worth the paper they're written on, things like.
Yeah, it's about education. It's not like anyone's individual fault. It's about education, because people need to understand what the gold standard process is and what the nice guidelines say. And not everyone's going to feel confident to know what a good report looks like. You can get bad assessments and bad reports in the NHS. You can get bad
Of
assessments and
course you
bad reports
can. There's not all
privately.
great doctors in the NHS, or
It's
like we're
The
saying,
fact
like I
is
was
that
saying.
most medical professionals work in the NHS and privately. So
Yeah,
it's
they
the
do
same
now.
thing, or they worked in the NHS for many years and then worked private,
Like,
they,
we worked in the public sector and we decided we didn't
exactly.
want to do it.
Well, and there's many reasons why people don't work for the NHS or work part-time or whatever. It's not like two different groups of people. They've all been trained the same
They're
way.
all doctors.
And it, you can get sort of a substandard report from anywhere. It's not about who the employer is, it's about what the process was. So for me, I'm like incredibly clear in my mind on that. And I think,
I mean, it seems like the only option. Like, if we could get more people to go private, the list would go down. But
and the people
it's
that really need
discouraged.
and the people that
Yeah,
really need to access the NHS would be able
yeah.
to. I think it's in a bit of a mess. We're in a bit of a mess in the UK at the moment with that, and it needs to be sorted out for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. I know I wrote you a load of questions, and I haven't really stuck to them at all, which I didn't think I would. I'm trying to stick to my questions, but there was so much interesting stuff that you were covering, and your Guilty Mum Club sounds amazing. If anyone wants to work with you or has any more questions for you around neurodiversity, self-compassion, parenting, how can they find you?
Probably best thing to do is head to my website, which is drjoethepsychologist.com, or find me on Instagram, Dr. Joe the Psychologist.
And her Instagram is really good. I really like it.
Oh, very, very kind. I try to keep up with it. It's a juggle, isn't it, as a working mum?
Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard. Like I said, I just had to cancel appointments. I was doing some Instagram, but it's like, I just saw a post a minute ago. I was like, who knew that when you were self-employed that you had to be a content creator as well?
I know. It's hectic.
Hectic. But it is, as much as Instagram is a place where there's a lot of misinformation, there's also a lot of great information, and there's a lot of support. And what I always say is, if like account makes you feel bad, delete it. Right. And if accounts just delete it. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Account makes you feel good, follow it. There's lots of accounts that I've deleted, like people who are just have minimalist houses and don't have any toys for their kids or any screens, and I'm like, well, brilliant. Okay, I'll just delete you because you're not making me feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for today.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you for having me.